Good morning and peace be upon you wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Qasim Rashid, and this is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It makes a big difference, helps continue to promote and boost our content, and make sure it reaches as far and wide as it possibly can. I'm coming to you from a hotel room in New York City. We are on the road this week, and I'm excited about our guest this week. He'll be on in just a minute. Maurice Mitchell, president of the Working Families Party. We've got a lot to discuss, everything from Zohran's win to just ideologically helping folks understand where they are on the political spectrum, why they matter, why they're different than the Republican and Democratic Party, different than the Green Party, Libertarians. And then I think the most important question is, what is their path to actual victory? We often hear that, well, third parties are just spoilers. They're going to split the vote for Democrats and let Republicans win. And I think you're going to want to hear the answer that Maurice Mitchell gives, because it is a powerful, brilliant answer, and it's a proven model of actual success. It just requires all of us to pay attention. But even their overall strategy is one that is effective and has won dozens of races already around the country, including Zohran Mamdani. So Maurice Mitchell will be returning. Before we dive into bringing him on, the other things that we need to talk about on today's show are the Epstein files, which I don't think anyone could have predicted a couple of months ago that they would have passed 427 to 1 in the House and unanimously in the Senate. The one holdout is MAGA Representative Clay Higgins of Louisiana. First of all, check that man's hard drive. Second of all, on what planet is it problematic to make sure people are aware about the horrors of a child sex trafficking ring and making sure we're holding the people accountable who are responsible to that? Apparently on Clay Higgins' planet, because he voted no. Now, here's the thing that we need to be very deliberate about. I keep hearing this from folks on the right, that, oh, just wait till you find out that Bill Clinton is on there. Wait till you find out some, liberals are on there. I don't care. I don't care who's on there. I don't care if it's somebody that I've known my entire life who's on there. If you were engaged in the horrific act of child sex trafficking, you deserve consequences for your horrific crimes. Like, this is not a debate. Why are people in a cult getting defensive about this? What is the matter with you that this is a hill that you're willing to die on? I really don't understand the psychosis here. I'm getting angry because we're talking about the most horrific things that children have suffered through, and you think that standing on a partisan issue is going to be your win? What is actually wrong with you? This is demented. This is sociopathic. If that's what you're thinking, you need to get actual therapy. You need to get help. You need to check into a medical clinic and tell them that you are suffering from a lack of basic empathy for children who have suffered horrific abuse. What can they do to treat you and teach you how to be a basic functioning human being? Because that's how serious this actually is. This is not a joke. And so we need to get past this partisan aspect of this trash and recognize that whoever was responsible for these horrific crimes against children, they need to be held accountable. I don't care what political party they belong to. I don't care their background or ethnicity or race. I don't care about any of that stuff. I care about ensuring that these children who suffered horrific abuse get some level of justice. They can never be made whole again, but some level of justice so that those who abuse them are not able to abuse more people. That's it. It's not complicated. This should not be a debate. And I'm so grateful, the fact that we had a 427 to 1 and a unanimous vote in the House and Senate. Now the question is, are we going to get the actual fully unredacted files? That's my concern. I'm not naive enough to think that just because they voted, suddenly we're going to get the files. I will not believe we get them until we actually have them in front of us unredacted. And my fear right now is that whatever we get is going to be severely redacted and the fight's going to continue. But I do want to give a shout out to 3 members of Congress, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, for making this happen. Congresswoman Summer Lee of Pennsylvania filed the initial injunction for the Department of Justice to have to produce this, to compel them to produce this. And then Congressman Ro Khanna of California and Congressman Thomas Massey of, I think, Tennessee filed a bipartisan piece of legislation calling on the Congress to compel the DOJ to release the full unredacted files. If these three had not stepped up, then we would not have these files right now. So, Summer Lee, Ro Khanna, and Thomas Massie, credit to them because they're the ones who made this happen. And I think it's important we recognize the people who have been fighting for this. When we come back from break, we're going to have Maurice Mitchell, president of the Working Families Party, talk about this in a bit more detail. And then afterwards, I'm going to talk a bit more about what's happening with Marjorie Taylor Greene because I'm getting a lot of emails about her as well. Short answer is I'm not convinced, but I do want to encourage people to do the right thing, even if it's late, but I'm still not convinced. If you're watching on Substack or on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We'll be right back after this break with Maurice Mitchell, president of the Working Families Party. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're watching on Substack or YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I am extraordinarily excited about our guest this week. Welcome back to the show, president of the Working Families Party, Maurice Mitchell. Brother, how are you?
And it's good to be with you, man. I'm feeling great.
We have a lot to celebrate, even though the world is on fire. We're seeing some major wins, and I'm just going to cut straight to the chase because we got a lot to talk about. The win of Zohran Mamdani, historic. I'm actually recording this from New York City. I can confirm Sharia law has not taken over, contrary to popular opinion. And I want to talk about the role.
I also heard somewhere that we might be in danger of mandated halal food, which I think is tasty and necessary, actually.
All I'm saying is halal is just better quality food. I've never heard somebody say it didn't taste good. So I'm just throwing it out there. We were promised taco trucks in every corner. We never got that. Maybe we'll get halal trucks in every corner, and that'll be good too. Halal taco trucks, right? Let's make it happen. Well, you have a lot to take credit for, and I know as a self-deprecating leader you're not going to take credit. You're going to deflect the praise, but I will say there's a lot to be said about what Working Families Party has done, not just in New York, but also in Virginia with the first statewide Muslim woman elected in Ghazala, Hashmi. She's a good friend, somebody I deeply admire. Let's talk. I want to cover a couple of different things. One, just very broadly, your thoughts on Zohran's election, what it means for New York City, what it means for the state, what it means for the country.
Well, we couldn't be more proud of Zohran. We couldn't be more proud of the New York Working Families Party, but also our movement around the country. And, I'd like to go a little bit back in time, back to 2021, when there were a number of progressives running for mayor. And unfortunately, we kind of split the vote, and those progressives were running in a competitive way, right? So we at the Working Families Party, we were duty bound the next time we got an opportunity to really leverage ranked choice voting, which is the way that people vote in New York City, in order to create a solidarity movement and build a slate of progressives to challenge the failed and disgraced policies of Andrew Cuomo and Mayor Adams. And, we worked really hard to make sure that that multiracial slate campaigned together, in many ways supported one another, and each one of those candidates felt like they would be the best mayor. And that solidarity movement really grew, and I think collectively painted the picture of the fact that Mayor Cuomo or Mayor Adams or those politics were politics of the past, and that Mayor Cuomo's victory was not assured and was not inevitable. And then Zohran Mamdani, I mean, what a talent. So we've known Zohran because he is a Working Families Party assembly person.
Right.
And he was able to run a campaign that was truly his, one that focused like a laser on affordability. Why? Because this is what we've been fighting for more than 20 years at the Working Families Party, is to make sure that politics actually serves working people. And again and again and again, what we're hearing from working people is that they want an economy that actually serves them, right? We talk about democracy. Working people want a democratic economy, right? And we don't think that that's crazy. We think in a democracy, working people should actually lead. Zohran led and campaigned in that fashion and built a movement that was so broad, that was that represented all of New York. He clearly loved New York City, campaigning against Andrew Cuomo, who clearly doesn't know New York City,
at
and
all.
what he knows he hates.
Yep.
Campaigning against the failed policies of Eric Adams, who he campaigned on New York City being a hellhole, and then he basically governed in that fashion,
Yep.
right? And so, Zoran's campaign was a love letter to New York City, a love letter to organizing, a
I
love
love that.
letter to working New Yorkers of all races, of all creeds, of all ethnicities, and people really embraced the campaign. It became a movement candidacy, and the thing that makes me so proud is that when all the votes were counted, we have a ballot line in New York, right? We have a ballot line in New York and in Connecticut, and we have something called fusion voting, which
Yep.
allows a political party to endorse the candidates of other political parties. So people might be on the ballot more than once. So Zoran was on the Democratic Party line
Yep.
and the Working Families Party line.
That's right.
And there were more votes for Zohran Mamdani on the Working Families Party line than his Republican challenger,
It's
Curtis
amazing.
Sliwa, on the Republican line. And so I like to say now, based on the results in the last election, that WFP can be called a third party or the
That's right.
second party in New York City.
Yeah, well, and arguably first party because your guy won. Your guy won first
Absolutely.
place, and I think that's important to own that. One of the things that Zoran did that I think shocked a lot of people is, everyone says that, you run to your party's extreme in the primary to get the win, and then you moderate in the center and try to, pull folks in.
Yep.
And I think what Zoran showed is that neither was he running to the left extreme, and neither did he moderate. He was running on his principles and values, and he simply stayed committed to those principles and values. And people are like, "Oh my God, what genius campaigning!" And I'm like, "No, I mean it's smart, but it's not like this unheard of concept to simply live your values." Can you talk a little bit about that? Because
Yeah.
he's getting attacked as being a communist and wanting free school, free buses and daycare and what he's doing is saying, hey, this is what I learned speaking to thousands of New Yorkers on the streets at the doors. And so, yeah, attack me all you want. I'm just going to lean into what they already told me they want. Why was that strategy so effective? And why was he so committed to staying on his course and not, moderating to the center or whatever the hell that means anymore?
Sure. That's a really great question. Well, that's something. Well, one of the things that I say whenever I'm talking to somebody who's thinking about running for office at any level, I say a few things. I say, number one, you have to run your race, right? And what that means is like, be you, be your authentic self, right? Sometimes people say, well, I have this, you know, this weird thing in my past. Well, run on that because that's who you are. I believe in this thing that might be controversial. Well, if that's what you believe, then
Right.
run on that,
Yep.
right? And then ultimately let the people decide. And the second thing I always say, so that's like a message of, authenticity, which is just basically being a person, right? Like people could see the difference between a politician that is trying to BS you for a vote and somebody who's authentically saying, like, look, these are the things I believe, right? You could take her or leave it, but I fundamentally believe these things and I think it'll make your life better, right? And what we've observed is that people don't need to agree with you on everything, but in order to win their vote, they need to believe in you. And
That's right.
people believed in Zoran.
Yeah.
People believed in Zoran, and they did not believe Andrew Cuomo. And most people don't. Most
No,
people
right.
know Andrew Cuomo is not just a typical politician, he's the worst brand of politician.
Hmm.
Most people know that. And most people, even people that have discomfort with Zoran because they don't know him or they've heard things about him or they've heard a lot of misinformation, when they see him, when they hear him, when they meet him, it's hard to come away from that interaction or on the debate stage or anywhere else and not feel this person is genuine,
Yeah.
which translates everything because at a time when people are really scared because the economy is going in the wrong direction, because the federal government is run by a bunch of hooligans. People are looking for authentic leaders that they could trust, and they see that in Zoran, and they see that in the crop of leadership that is sprouting up all across the country. That isn't waiting their turn, isn't listening to the establishment, isn't listening to people in official positions in either party. They're taking leadership because we need that urgent sort of groundswell of committed people fighters like Zoran. And there's going to be a Zoran effect of young people around the country and
Hope
other
so.
people,
Yeah,
young or otherwise, who say, you know what, I wasn't thinking about running for office, or I thought running for office was just for a certain type of person, but I want to make a difference. And I'm going to make that difference through getting involved, public service, organizing. We saw that with the Obama effect. There was a
that's right.
whole
Yeah,
cadre of young people who got involved in different ways. I think this is like another movement moment like that, but we've learned the lessons from Obama so that we could do it in a different way, which is very,
that's
very
right. And
exciting.
make it sustainable. Well, one
That's
thing
right.
and if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Maurice Mitchell, president of the Working Families Party. We'll talk about the party in more detail in just a minute. I was talking to my wife about this, that one thing about Zoran that just, removing him as the person, but just as kind of the identity, you've got a person who's got, South Asian ethnicity, African upbringing, and American elevation. And you're fusing three continents together, basically. And what better a representative of New York City can you have than
Yeah,
somebody who brings that to the table?
it's funny because, all these people who tried to paint him as an outsider or foreign, I was like, have you been to Queens?
That's right. Yeah,
This, you
exactly.
couldn't pick a more New York candidate than
That's
Zoran.
right. That's
I
exactly
mean,
right.
like literally, have you ever been to Queens?
Yeah,
Have you actually ever walked the streets of New York City?
that's
Because,
right.
in New York, um, if you squint a little, you could see the future,
That's right.
right?
Love that.
Because you see everybody,
Yeah.
and everybody is sending their kids to the same public schools, and they're all hanging out with one another, and we are all on the same subways, and we're all eating each other's foods, and we're
Yep.
all in each other's business,
Yep.
and Zoran represents that, and it's clear that he loves his city, right?
Yep.
And he loves the city's diversity, and the city in return has fallen in love with him and the movement that he represents, and so I think all the billionaires that spent more than $20 million against Zoran, their money backfired because if you were a New Yorker, if you were an actual voter, a lot of the anti-Zoran messages just fell flat because people didn't see the city that they knew in those messages,
That's right.
and it only attracted them more to the movement that we were
Yeah.
building.
Yeah. I love the comment he made. I forget what podcast he was on when he was like, they're spending more money against me than I want to tax them. He's like, Habibi, just pay the tax. You don't got to
This
spend the
is
money on that.
this is really inefficient, but
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to watch Mike Bloomberg and Bill Ackman and others burn their money on
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah.
Y-
Absolutely right.
because there's a lot of really bad ways they could be spending that money if they want to waste it on TV ads that only make our candidate more irresistible. Go right ahead, fellas.
That's exactly right. And I was having this conversation a little while ago that, Massachusetts increased their tax on millionaires by 4%, not 2%, but by 4%. And 4 years later, they've got I think like a $5.7 billion surplus.
Correct.
And the number of millionaires in Massachusetts has increased by more than 40%.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, the whole capital flight thing is a fallacy, right? Like
yeah,
one of the points of being unnecessarily wealthy, like the people that we're actually
yeah,
talking about, right? We're not talking about like people are doing okay, or somebody has a small business, or
yeah,
a lawyer or a doctor. We're talking about the very, very top, is that those people do whatever they want to do and live wherever they want to live.
that's right.
The marginal tax isn't going to have them
At
change
all.
residence. It's just like a fallacy. And also if you notice, every single time we try to argue for pro working people legislation, then all of these billionaires and wealthy people like talk about a lack of patriotism. Or like they always claim that they're going to leave the city, leave the state, or leave the country, right?
Yeah,
Well, look, I mean, if that's your mark of loyalty, then leave.
yeah.
We'll figure it out.
That's right. Yeah, don't threaten us with a good time. And I feel like people still don't understand that You can be worth $10 million, which is an absurd amount of money. And still, that's an insignificant amount of money to the billionaires that we're actually talking about.
Yes, yes. I mean, look, I just think that it's a math issue, right? People have probably met a millionaire, right?
Yeah,
And if anybody who owns a home in New York is technically on paper a millionaire,
yeah, that's
right?
right. That's right.
Right?
Yeah,
And people may have, maybe your boss, maybe the person who runs your country is like a multimillionaire,
yeah,
right? And I think when most people think about billionaires, they in their head are thinking like, oh, a multimillionaire, somebody who like has it pretty good. No, no, no. We're talking ungodly concentrations of wealth that make no sense, where
yeah.
they're spending billions of dollars and then the year after there's more money in their account
That's
because
right.
there's no amount of money that they could possibly spend on
That's
any
right.
given year where
That's right.
they're actually depleting the amount of money they have. It's
Yep.
like godlike power and money that no human should ever have. That's
Exactly
what we're
right.
talking about. And there's just like 3,000 of them on the planet, around 1,000 of them in the United States.
That's right.
And the presence of them is a representation of a failed economic system.
That's right.
It isn't like a good thing that they exist. And it's hard for people to wrap their heads around it. But when you have that type of money and power, and you know that you could literally do anything, you get things like, really depraved people with their own island so that they could do sex crimes and fly their friends in. You have the money and power to do everything. Nobody should have the money and power to do anything that they desire and know that they won't have any accountability.
Well, very well said. Yeah, Justice Brandy said over a century ago, right before the Great Depression, that we can either have great concentration of wealth in the hands of a few, or we can have a functioning democracy, but we
That's right.
cannot have both. And we're
Cannot have
seeing
both.
that today. And I think that the Working Families Party is an antidote to this massive hoarding of wealth. One word usage I've stopped using is saying that Elon Musk is worth 500 billion, and instead I'm saying that he has hoarded 500 billion. No one's worth
Correct.
that money, but they have hoarded that kind of money, and we need to break that up. But Working Families Party, I see that as the antidote. So I want to start with a couple of really basic questions because
Yeah.
the last time I had you on, maybe 5, 6 months ago, I got a bunch of questions from people saying, well, how are they any different than libertarians or the Greens? Or, what's the ideological difference? Or are they just going to run for president every 4 years like the Greens? And why are we wasting our time with them? And I
Right.
said, these are excellent questions that I can answer, but I'd rather you hear directly from, the man in charge, the man leading this party. So let's start with some really basic questions because I think, what seems basic to us for people who are unfamiliar in the political space or just waking up, I think they need to see directly what the differences are. So, very basically, on an ideological spectrum, how is the Working Families Party different from Democrats, Republicans, Greens, and Libertarians, which are kind of the four other parties we talk about often?
Okay. So, most people, when they think of the Republicans, right, and I think this is true, the Republicans have been taken over by a ultra right wing Christian nationalist cult, right?
Yeah.
So there's a there is diversity inside of the Republican Party, right? But they're all going in that direction,
Yeah.
right? The Democratic Party is a big tent. Our critique of the Democratic Party is that the tent is too big, right? That having a party where the tent includes labor unions and the actual bosses that they're striking against
Makes
is untenable,
yeah.
right? Having a party that includes Mark Cuban and AOC is untenable, right? That's one of our critiques. And look, in the late 90s, we saw the Democratic Party lurch towards Wall Street so
Yeah.
that they could get access to their resources and everything else. We thought that that was a mistake at the time, which is why we started the Working Families Party with labor and community organizations that felt that the Democratic Party had basically abandoned its working class base, and the unions, the labor unions that had become central pillars of the working of the Democratic Party. So the Working Families Party, we believe that there should be a tent, and the tent should include working people that believe this simple idea that in a democracy, everyday people should govern, and in order to do that, we have to constrain and control capital. We have to control the ability of people with wealth to do bad things with their money and to be able to capture our democracy, right? And many people who have different ideas could believe that. So there's people who identify as democratic socialist in the Working Families Party. There's people who identify as, leftists at the Working Families Party. There's people who don't have political identities who are like, this is bad. I'm a working person. I deserve respect. I've I've organized in my union for 20 years, and I know that the bosses steal from us, and working people are the lifeblood of this economy, and I want a politics that aligns with that, right? And so we include a lot of people in our tent. We don't include the bosses. We don't include the billionaires. And to me, that is an ideology that is grounded in the power and the dynamism of the bottom against the top, right? Like a lot of people in our politics focus on sideshows, right? Like people are obsessed with whatever the hell trans high school students are doing, right? And we think that that's a diversion. You're focusing on, I think, maybe 1% of the population and trying to nuzzle your values into their lives.
Yeah.
We are concerned with 1% of the population, but that 1% are the billionaires, right? And we think that if all of us got together across our differences and shine a light on how the billionaires are attempting to capture our democracy, capture our economy at a time of untold wealth, then that would be a cause for solidarity where a lot of people will come together. And that includes people who like pulled the lever last year for Trump, right? Who did so not because they're white Christian nationalists, but did so because they wanted to challenge the status quo, right?
Yeah.
Some of those Zoran voters, some of those Zoran, just looking at the numbers, and some of the voters who voted for our candidates all across the country, some of them had to be people who voted for the Republican at the top of the
Yeah.
ticket last cycle,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
so if we're going to build, we need to build a supermajority of working people, and that means we need to meet working people where they're at. Look, like I don't begrudge any working person. I don't have a enemy with or an opponent that's a working person. To me, everybody is a potential conversation away from joining the Working Families Party,
That's
simply
right.
because people have been bamboozled by the billionaires who spend literally hundreds of millions of dollars convincing working people that the billionaire fight is their fight doesn't mean that they're my enemy. We
That's
just
right.
need to organize harder, and that's what the Working Families Party does. Now, the way that we do it is that we're focusing on governing. We actually want to win elections,
That's
and
right.
we want to govern. And
And and,
so,
so let me ask a question then, because this
yeah,
is an important note. And I will just very briefly go back. I wish the scrutiny put on trans kids was instead put on billionaires, and I wish the freedom to just do whatever they want that's put on billionaires was put on trans kids. Just like leave trans people alone, focus on the billionaires because they're the ones who are screwing you over, and they're the only ones screwing you over. That's the 1%, as you said, the only minority that's destroying this country and this world. But let's talk about the practical aspect of what Working Families Party is doing, because I
yeah,
think this is an area where whenever we talk about a non-mainstream party, just for the lack of a better word, non-Republican Democrat party,
yeah,
is that, well, you're going to split the vote, you're going to let the Republicans win because you're splitting the vote with Democrats. And I'm like, well, one, you don't fundamentally understand how Working Families Party works, and so let's talk about that. And then two, one of the criticisms we see of the Green Party is, well, they just show up to run for president every four
yeah,
years, and I still have PTSD from Ralph Nader in 2000. So
yeah, yeah,
I don't, I'm not going to defend that, right? But
yeah.
you guys have a different model. You guys have a
Yes, we
very
do.
different model, and
Yes,
it's a very successful model. And I don't think enough people know about it yet. So please, let's talk about the practical strategy and the wins that Working Families Party brings to the table to ensure we're fighting for working people while not enabling a Republican win by splitting the vote.
yeah, absolutely. So look, yeah, you said it better than I could. We live in a very rigid two-party system, and people get hives and they get triggered whenever they hear like third party or something other than the Democrats or Republicans, and we take that seriously, right? Like the spoiler problem or the spoiler dilemma, where a third party candidate runs in the general election and takes votes away from the candidate that they have most in common, and therefore might help the candidate that they have the least in common with. That's a real thing. It's
That's right.
math. It's not a
Yeah,
myth, it's math.
that's right.
The way that we avoid that, because we take that seriously, is look, we cook what we have in the kitchen, right? We try to be nimble. And so in places like New York and Connecticut and Oregon, where we actually have a line on the ballot and we use something called fusion voting, that allows us to be able to, when it comes time to endorse a president, we could cross endorse the Democrat and
Hmm.
say, in that binary fight, yeah, absolutely, the Republican is worse, right? But you could vote on the Working Families Party line because we do have differences with the Democrats. And if you want to express those differences and have it not get lost in the sauce of the total vote, the vote total, vote on the Working Families Party line. And then we could translate that, if that person wins, into real leverage so that they could deliver on the
Yeah,
working families agenda up
yeah,
and down the ballot, right? So not just for president, but up and down the ballot. And oftentimes, the working families vote is the difference maker, right? Like the
right.
actual number of people who vote on the working families party line is the difference maker. So our endorsement and people's presence on our ballot line in those states becomes very, very powerful and is very, very prized. So that's what we do in New York and Connecticut. But in places like Philadelphia, and there's other cities like this, there is something called the minority party set aside. So, in the laws of those municipalities, you can have only one party sit in municipal government.
Hmm.
And so there's in Philadelphia, there's two seats that are at-large seats that are for the minority party. For years, it's been the Republicans, which basically
Right.
meant that people just raised their hand and they registered, and then they got two seats
Yeah,
in city council. And we felt that in a pretty progressive city like Philadelphia, that there were probably more working families voters than there were Republicans, and we were right.
there
So
you go.
there are two working families, not Democrats, working families at large, city council people
Amazing.
in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is a two-party city, Democrats, working families,
Love it.
and we've done that, and then also we've run in general elections against the Republican and Democrat and won. Like people know of Tish James in
Right.
2003. She ran as a Working Families Party only candidate for Brooklyn City Council and defeated the Republicans and Democrats and came in not as a Democrat. Tish James is a Working Families Party candidate, and the Democrats later adopted her.
Yeah.
Just this past election, we had a number of Working Families Party only in Onondaga County Legislature in New York, in Newburgh City Council, in Hartford, Connecticut, in a number of places, and there are Working Families Party only people. Some people say, like, well, are you running your own candidates against the Republicans and Democrats? If there's a path to victory, yes, and we
Yeah.
win. But what
Yeah.
we won't do is be foolhardy, and where there's no path to victory, where there's no way and reason, are we going to run our own people? Because
That's dangerous. Yeah. I get it.
we believe that people's time, people's energy, people's strategy, uh, we should be very careful with it, and we should
That's right.
respect people. We should tell them the truth. So we told people the truth, and we said, look, there's no way we're not on the ballot everywhere. We can't run our own presidential candidate and win, right?
Not
But
yet.
we can tell you that Donald Trump and his fascist agenda is orders of magnitude worse and more problematic and will be existentially worse for our democracy, for our economy, than voting for the Democrats. And under the Democrats, we could continue to organize. So
That's
vote
right.
for the Democrat there. And then on the local level, we have a set of candidates that we think you should vote for that are our people. Just this last election, we ran close to 700 people in the ballot
Amazing.
all across the country.
That's
So we are
incredible.
serious. We are a serious party that's serious about governing. We govern every single day all across the country. Not only did we win the New York City mayorship, but we won in Albany. We won in Buffalo. We won in Syracuse. The tallies are done in Seattle. We won in Seattle.
Yep.
We won in Dayton, Ohio.
Yep.
Like, this is not a fluke.
Across the
This is a
country. Yeah.
movement. We are winning on our terms. And so anybody that actually believes in the ideals that the Democratic Party professes, but often, almost always doesn't deliver because they are obsessively clinging to AI, crypto, APAC, pharma, you name it. the Working Families Party is actually delivering on that promise, and we're doing it on the local level and in state legislatures everywhere.
I want to double down on this a really important point you made that I don't think enough people realize that the only person in U.S. history to convict a former president in a criminal trial is a Working Families Party candidate, Ted James.
Correct. Correct.
That is, you want to talk about past performance as the best indicator of future success? That to me is the proven model. When the Republicans capitulated as spineless failures, when the Democrats didn't have the courage to move forward, a Working Families Party a black woman named Tish James said, "No, not on our watch. We're going to get this done," and she got it done. And we have a 34 times convicted felon as a president because she had the courage and the integrity and the support of a party to get that work done. And so for those wondering, is this for real? I don't know how much more real you want it to get. I don't know what other example you want than to demonstrate the power of this party to do what every other major political party did not have the courage. With all their billionaires backing them, they couldn't do what the Working Families Party did with a fraction of that budget and size. And so that's why I, by the way, have registered as a Working Families Party member. Will still vote Democrat, may even run as a Democrat in the future, who knows? But on your point about making this a principled party on working people, those are the values that I deeply care about. And then these 700-ish people that you had run is powerful. We're down to our last couple of minutes, Maurice. I want to be respectful of your time. What is the plan for midterms? How can folks watching this get involved in your midterm strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get to next November, we have to go through what I hope to be one of the most raucous and intense primary seasons we've
Yes.
ever experienced.
Yes.
And we're really bullish on these primaries. That's one of the tools that we use. So, the Working Families Party, we recruit our own people, and we often run them in Democratic Party primaries.
Amazing.
Because in many places, the only way that people could govern is either through the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So
Right.
we recruit working families Democrats to run in those primaries. And look, there's this learned sort of fear-based model inside of that party, inside of the Democratic Party, where everybody's supposed to wait their turn. Nobody's supposed to primary a sitting incumbent.
Yep.
Nobody's supposed to challenge the Democratic Party leadership. Nobody, look, that has to go out the window. That has to
100%.
go out the window. Those politics have failed this country, not just the Democratic Party, but working people. And so we're looking forward to, and we want people to get, like we just announced, we don't even know who the challenger is, but we just announced in Pennsylvania that we're coming for John Fetterman, right?
Yes. Thank you.
We're coming and we're looking for maybe there's a person who's listening and watching right now that wants to be that challenger. Let us know. Listen, if you're a corporate Democrat, if you rather talk to APAC or AI or crypto or pharma or the real estate lobby or the Fraternal Order of Police and listen to their dictates instead of your constituents, then you're going to have some trouble this next cycle. And we think that that's a good thing because that's how we build a movement. And we need a movement to overwhelm the right wing, right?
Right.
We need November, we can't simply win. We have to overwhelm them.
That's right.
There needs to be a wave that is a historic wave election that includes everybody, right? Like there's a small number of people who are cult-like fanatics of Trump, and then there's everyone else. And we need all those people to join forces in order to create a loud electoral rebuke of Trump. And we think that starts by surfacing the leaders, right? Like that's not going to happen if we're just voting for milquetoast people, corporate people, people who all they do is get into office and argue why they can't do anything. We're tired of that. And so if anybody listening or anybody watching wants to get involved in that movement, they could find us. We try to make ourselves very accessible. We're on all of the platforms that the corporate titans and the techno-fascists control, right? At Working Families, at all those places, workingfamilies.org. I'm very accessible at Maurice WFP on all those platforms. My DMs are open. We're looking for that next wave of leadership. Like people. If you're going to learn anything from Zohran, what I said before is like he ran his race. Don't become a facsimile of Zohran, right? We're looking for you to be you.
Yes.
And we want to build a movement where everybody could show up and be them in all their complexity, and where we recognize that the leaders that we've been waiting for are us. And if anybody's interested in that, like I'm really bullish about what we could do next year as a movement. Join forces with us because we need to be on the streets. We need to be protesting. We need to be we need to be uh, engaging in boycotts. Like for example, we join forces with folks who are doing the "We Ain't Buying It" boycott, and we need to elect working class heroes on every single level of government, from school boards to library boards to city councils to state legislatures, all the way up to Congress and beyond. And if we do that, there'll be a wave that will flip state legislatures, that will flip Congress, that will create an inevitability on our side where more and more people, including some of your folks in your group chats that were like, I'm not about politics, or some people who, some of your bros who, thought it was cool and edgy to vote for Trump, or, because they saw it on a podcast. There's room for them. There's room for
Yeah.
their redemption, right? And so this is our time to do that.
I love that. And there's more than 500,000 seats up for election every year. You guys are hitting 1,000. We got to make that 5,000 and 50,000 and then 500,000 one day. President of Working Families Party, Maurice Mitchell, brother, you're doing the Lord's work. Strength to you. Get some rest. I know you're running a mile a minute, but you're welcome back anytime. Thank you for being with us today.
It was good to be with you, brother.
Peace out. That was Maurice Mitchell, an amazing brother, amazing human being, president of the Working Families Party. And look, the vision he's painting for these next 6 months, the next 2 years, it's really powerful. The fact that they're focused on primaries heavily in the Democratic process, in the Democratic Party primary, that they're already recruiting to replace John Fetterman is fantastic. And it's going to require all of us to get involved and play our roles. So visit workingfamiliesparty.org or .com, I think, and or just Google Working Families Party, find your local chapter, and get involved. Hold them accountable. They're making some tall promises, and I'm telling you, they're delivering on those promises. So hold them accountable. I've shared this before. I grew up low income. I grew up on food stamps. I grew up in Section 8 housing. I understand that struggle firsthand. And to see a political party really focus on working families and say, look, we'll be a big tent party, but we're not going to have people who are ideologically trying to destroy each other in the same party. And it's actually one side trying to destroy the other side. You can't have the billionaires and the people that the billionaires are exploiting in the same party. That doesn't make any sense. And so when President Maurice Mitchell says the tent is too big, that's what he means. It's not too big in the sense of including people of diverse, immutable characteristics like faith or gender or religion or creed. He's talking about you can't have the wolf and the sheep in the same party. You can't have the billionaires who are hoarding wealth and exploiting people and the people being exploited in the same party. And unfortunately, that's what the Democratic Party has become. And that's where we need to move away. And you heard him say that it was in the 90s when they lurched towards Wall Street that they formed because they wanted to create a party that truly did serve the needs of working people. And I think that's where we are right now with the Working Families Party. And that's why I registered. I hope you register as well to get involved, because that's how we're going to ultimately break this duopoly, ensure that we have meaningful representation for working folks in Congress that simply doesn't exist right now. Okay, I've been getting a ton of questions from folks saying, what do I think of Marjorie Taylor Greene? If you haven't seen, she's gone full speed ahead against Donald Trump. Donald Trump has publicly denounced her and has publicly called for a primary challenge against her. Marjorie Taylor Greene, on the other hand, has come out with a mea culpa, apologizing and acknowledging that she was part of the toxicity of our politics of the last 5-6 years, apologizing for increasing the rhetoric, increasing the hate, increasing the discord, and now calling for Americans to work together. And look, I will always appreciate when someone can acknowledge that they were wrong in the past. I can always appreciate when someone can say that they did the wrong thing or that they caused harm and that they want to mitigate. Now, I'm seeing some folks say, hallelujah, eureka, she's seen the light, let's, bring her into the fold and all, let bygones be bygones. And that's where I have a problem. You guys have to understand, um, in the world of politics, there are a couple of things that are true. One, most politicians are pretty easily convinced to do something for short-term gain. And we've seen politicians flip-flop often. That's what they do. We've seen, I mean, look at Nikki Haley. How many times did she say, I'm anti-Trump, and then pro-Trump, and then anti-Trump, and then served as his UN ambassador, and then anti-Trump, and then pro-Trump, and then anti... So it's kind of like this changing of the winds. Whatever makes her feel like it's her prerogative, she's going to do. I don't see any real difference right now with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Look, in 10 years, if we look back and we see this massive shift and she continues to actually fight for working people and reject corporate money and live these values of compassion and empathy, great. That's a different conversation. But we can't just let somebody flip a switch and say, okay, now magically all the harm you've done is gone. If someone in her shoes wants to bring about meaningful change, there's a couple of things you can do. One, I will give her credit she's already doing, and she is making clear that she stands against this fascist agenda that Trump is putting forth. That takes courage, and I want to acknowledge that, and I want to give credit where due. She's also rejecting all AIPAC money. Again, an important step forward and something that we should recognize her for doing, because at the end of the day, AIPAC is an extraordinarily powerful and influential lobby. They have primaried candidates. They have pushed out candidates who are incumbents by spending absurd amounts of money against their centrist or right-wing challengers. And for her to stand up against AIPAC is important. Now, where do we go from here? Well, one, we need to see meaningful action. What does that look like? We need to see you raising money for the people doing work. Raise money for Cori Bush as she runs for election to get back into Congress. Raise money for Summer Lee, who's in a vulnerable seat that AIPAC is targeting. Raise money for Abdul El-Sayed in Michigan, who is running against AIPAC-funded candidates. Show your actions with your dollars, with your wallet. Money talks, and you can't fake that. So get involved. That's one thing. Two, let's talk about your actual legislative record. Let's stop attacking women's reproductive health. Let's stop attacking migrants and Muslims and black people and trans people. Let's stop attacking marginalized communities. Talk about more than just your words and talk about the actions that you've taken and try to undo those actions as well. Start to introduce legislation with Democrats on maybe you don't need to go as far as universal health care, although I think you should, because Marjorie Taylor Greene has been adamant that this shutdown is denying people health care and that the Republicans don't really have a health care plan. Get on the bandwagon. In fact, let me check myself. Get on the bandwagon for universal health care because it's the right place to be. It's more affordable, it saves lives, it's more sustainable, and it gets these health corporations, these health exploitation limited liability corporations, it gets them out of our business and lets us have actual health care with our physicians. And then finally, be sustainable. It's not just about raising money once. It's not just about passing or introducing one or two pieces of legislation. It's about being sustainable. Are you going to be here 6 months from now? Are you going to be here at midterms? Are you going to be here for the 2028 election and continue on this trajectory of doing good work? Or are you going to flip-flop again? And I think that's got to be the toughest thing because at the end of the day, tides will turn, the public opinion will change, and the question is going to be where is she going to stand at that point in time? And that's where only time can test someone's integrity. This is why I'm so high on Working Families Party. They've been doing this for more than 20 years. They have a proven model for more than 20 years. They didn't just show up last week and win an election. They have built towards this for literal decades. And that's got to count for something. And so for those emailing me about Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's my view. Raise the money for the people doing the hard work, that have been doing the hard work, the people that you've harmed. Raise that money. Apologize to David Hogg for harassing him after Parkland, for alleging or insinuating that it wasn't a real attack. Call David Hogg. Apologize to him publicly and ask for his, forgiveness sounds weird, but ask for his recognition that you did apologize. Don't expect him to accept the apology, but you do your job and apologize and be genuine about it. Talk about gun safety. Two, once you raise the money, then do the work. Get these folks elected who are fighting for these things that you say that you care about now. And then finally, be sustainable. over time. All right. Thank you, my friends, for tuning in. As I've said, if you're listening on Substack or watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Grateful for your support as this show and platform continues to grow. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban News Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. My friends, be safe, be strong, remain hopeful. Much love to you, and we'll see you next week. Peace.